In a bustling town known for its vibrant culture and bustling streets, lived a woman named Miemie. She was a sight to behold, her beauty unmatched. Men and women alike would stop and stare as she passed by, her features flawless, her skin radiant. Wherever she went, Mimi drew attention. She was the envy of her friends and the pride of her family. But for all her outer beauty lived a stain on the inside. Her tongue was as sharp as her looks were soft, and her pride soared high above her virtues. She had a knack for speaking without care, dismissing anyone who dared to offer advice or critique. When her siblings Sissy and Okin would gently point out her rudeness, Mimi would shrug it off, laughing. People hate to hear the truth, and I am just blunt. Everyone is too sensitive these days, she would say, her voice dripping with disdain. One sunny afternoon, Mimi and a friend Tony decided to visit the city's most prestigious salon. The salon was always bustling with people, and Mimi enjoyed the attention she got just by walking into the room. As they entered, a worker escorted them to the waiting lounge, where several other clients sat patiently. Beside Mimi sat an elegant woman, well dressed and quietly minding her business. The woman radiated calmness, her gaze focused on a magazine in her hands. But Mimi, who enjoyed staring attention, began sniffing theatrically, scrunching her nose in disgust, as if sensing an awful smell. She leaned closer to Tony, loudly whispering, "What's that smell?" Tony looked at her puzzled, trying to understand Mimi's odd behavior. Mimi sniffed again, then dramatically threw her head back and exclaimed, "Jesus!" Heads turned, and an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Her voice cut through like a knife as she pointed at the woman beside her, covering her nose with mock horror. "Madam, is that smell coming from you? Please don't suffocate us." The woman looked up, startled, her cheeks reddening with shame and confusion. "Excuse me," she whispered, barely able to find a voice. "Madam, I'm telling you, you should have stayed at home if you had this kind of smell following you around. Do you want to kill people? Have some decency." Mimi scoffed, her voice growing louder. Some people chuckled uncomfortably, while others exchanged pitiful glances with the woman. Tony tried to pull Mimi away, but she resisted, waving a dismissive hand. "Babes, let me tell you the truth. I'm sure she did not know she has a terrible body odor." "Madam, I think you should see a doctor," she continued, facing the woman. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She stood up, gathering her belongings, her voice barely above a whisper. "May your words come back to you," she muttered, leaving the salon with a wounded heart. As the woman fled the salon, face flushed with shame and eyes downcast, murmurs filled the air. The crowd had watched, wide eyed, as Mimi's sharp words sliced through the woman, leaving her humiliated. A lady, also waiting her turn, leaned over to the woman next to her. "Why did she embarrass her like that?" The other woman raised an eyebrow, half amused. "You don't know her." "Who is she?" the first woman asked, genuinely puzzled. "That's Mimi," the woman replied, her voice low but unmistakably sharp. "Our town's Miss Perfect. She thinks just because she's beautiful, she can talk to anyone however she wants. I'm surprised you haven't heard of her. Everyone around here knows Mimi and her sharp mouth." The woman shook her head in disapproval. "Beauty doesn't give her the right," she muttered. "She wouldn't try that with me." Meanwhile, Tony, Mimi's friend, stood silently, feeling the weight of the stares and whispers, ashamed by her friend's behavior and the growing tension. You'll meet me in the car, Tony said coldly. If you're not out in a minute, I'm going home alone. Mimi rolled her eyes, muttering as she followed Tony to the car. Silence filled the car ride home. When they arrived at Mimi's house, her mother was sitting in the garden, enjoying the late afternoon sun. Good afternoon, Ma, Tony greeted. Mimi's mother noticed Tony's somber expression. What happened, my dear? Why does your face look like this? Her mother asked, worried. With a sigh, Tony recounted the incident at the salon. Mimi's mother listened, a mixture of sadness and frustration growing in her heart. This girl is getting worse each day, she said, shaking her head. Thank you, my daughter, for telling me. I will speak to her again. That evening, Mimi's mother called her into the sitting room. Her voice was gentle yet firm as she began. Mimi, I heard what happened today. Is it true that you humiliated a woman in public? But Mama, Mimi scoffed, rolling her eyes. You weren't there. The smell was unbearable. I was only being honest. What did I do wrong? Her mother looked at her, deep sadness in her eyes. Mimi, there is a way to speak truth without wounding others. You could have quietly spoken to the woman in private, but instead, you embarrassed her in front of everyone. Don't you realize that such an attitude could ruin your future? Maybe chuckled dismissively. Ruin my future? Mama, I already have my future set. Yemi will be back from abroad next month and we'll be getting married. You should pray for him to come home safely instead of worrying about me. Her mother shook her head, her voice rising with frustration. And do you think Yemi will tolerate this attitude? A husband is not just for beauty. I pray he opens his eyes. Mimi, it is not only your beauty that people notice. People see your heart, and yours is growing colder by the day. Mimi scoffed, standing up to leave. Mama, Yemi loves me as I am. Stop worrying. Left behind, her mother sat down, disheartened, whispering a prayer that Mimi's character would change. Lord, help her to see that beauty fades, but kindness lasts. Mimi continued to act with the same air of arrogance and disregard for others' feelings. She showed no signs of change, brushing off every gentle correction from her family and friends. Then one sunny afternoon, her best friend Tony stopped by to pick her up for her birthday party. Mimi dressed up to impress in her finest clothes, admired herself in the mirror before they left. They arrived at a lovely venue, buzzing with music and laughter. And as Mimi stepped in, she was taken aback. The lights dimmed, and familiar faces began to surround her. Her family and friends all stood there, beaming, and in the center of it all, kneeling on one knee, was Yemi with a small velvet box in his hand. It was a surprise proposal. Overcome with joy, Mimi gasped as Yemi opened the box to reveal a sparkling ring. She couldn't believe it. Will you marry me, Mimi? He asked with a warm smile. Mimi was beside herself with happiness, barely able to speak as she accepted the ring. And everyone around clapped and cheered, sharing in her joy. As the night went on, Mimi showed off her ring, basking in the attention and compliments from her family and friends. Yemi, grinning from ear to ear, pulled her close and whispered, I just wanted to surprise you, my love. I hope I did a good job. When the celebration finally wound down and everyone returned to Mimi's house, a mother gathered everyone around for a prayer of blessing over the couple. After the prayer, she took Mimi's hands in hers, speaking softly yet firmly. Mimi, my daughter, you are blessed, and tonight you receive the man who loves you dearly. But as you step into this new chapter, please remember to soften your heart, treat others with kindness, and speak with gentleness. Tony, the ever loyal friend, nodded in agreement. Yes, Mimi, we all love you and want the best for you. A gentle heart will make your beauty shine even brighter. But Mimi's smile faded and her face twisted into a mocking smirk. She turned to Tony, her voice filled with a tone of mockery. See who is giving advice. You, with the good character. Where has that gotten you? Do you even have a boyfriend? Look at me. I'm about to leave you all behind in the single life. I did not just get myself a man. I got the best man and with a beautiful life ahead. Hope you people remember, after the wedding, I am going to relocate with Yemi back to the States, she said as she adjusted her ring. Tony's face fell, hot flashing across her eyes, and a stone silence filled the room. Mimi's mother, taken aback by her daughter's harsh words, immediately interjected. Mimi, why would you say such a thing to your friend? That's unkind. Mimi waved her hand dismissively and laughed. Mama, you take things too seriously. Tony knows I'm just joking. Don't you, Tony? She turned to Tony, nudging her, and let out a careless laugh. Despite the hurt in her eyes, Tony forced a small smile and nodded, but her laughter was forced, and her eyes held a sadness that Mimi was too proud to notice. As Tony returned home that night, she couldn't shake off the sting of Mimi's words. Sitting alone in a quiet room, she remembered the celebration, the proposal, and Mimi's mocking words about her own single status. Tony had been a loyal friend, always supportive, yet Mimi's careless words cut deep. Unable to hold back her pain, Tony cried, wondering why someone as kind hearted as herself remained single, while Mimi, with all her flaws, seemed to have everything: a loving fiance, an adoring family, and a beautiful future. Meanwhile, Mimi and Yemi were busy preparing for their wedding. Yemi took her to meet his family, and Mimi did her best to put on her most charming, respectful persona, remembering her mother's warning not to ruin her own joy with her very sharp tongue. Yemi's family admired her beauty, praising her as a perfect match for Yemi. Every detail of the wedding was meticulously planned, and Tony, despite her own art, continued to support Mimi, helping with decorations, invitations, and every aspect of the wedding preparation. Then the wedding day arrived. The house was a whirlwind of activity, with family and friends bustling around. Mimi was getting her makeup done in a quiet room, her dress perfectly arranged, her heart set on making this day flawless. Her sister Sissy came into the room to check on her, bringing along a 4-year-old son who had been feeling unwell and needed her close attention. The child, excited and curious, began playing near Mimi's shoes, and in a moment of childish clumsiness, knocked over a cup of water, splashing it on the bridal shoes. Mimi's face darkened, her temper flaring. She snapped, Sissy, can't you control your child? Look, he has ruined my shoes. Why did you even bring him here? I don't want my in laws to think this is how our family behaves. Take him out. Sissy froze, shocked by her sister's hurtful words. Trying to hold back her own emotions, she responded, Me, it's just a child, and he needs me. Just because he's unwell doesn't make him any less human. I would never hide my son or treat him differently. Mimi rolled her eyes, dismissing her sister's pain. Why are you taking it so personally? I just don't want my new family to think I'll bring up a child that is this spoiled. Hurt by her sister's callousness, Sissy held her child close, tears welling up in her eyes. If this is how you feel, Mimi, then perhaps I don't belong here on your wedding day. With that, she walked out, holding her son tightly, leaving Mimi standing alone in silence. Later, after the engagement party, Mimi's mother learned what had happened. She was furious and heartbroken, calling Mimi aside to scold her. Mimi, what is wrong with you? How could you say such hurtful things to your own sister on your wedding day? She has always been there for you, and she deserves your respect. Feeling a mix of shame and stubbornness, Mimi attempted to call Sisi to apologize, but her sister ignored every call. Mimi's mother, seeing the tension in her family, called Sisi herself, pleading on Mimi's behalf. Sisi finally agreed to attend the wedding for the sake of family peace. The wedding went off as planned. The ceremony was beautiful, with all the guests admiring Mimi's beauty and elegance. She and Yemi received numerous gifts from his family: cars, household items, and lovely decorations for their new home. The couple was showered with blessings and set off to begin their new life. Days after the wedding, Mimi and Yemi settled into their new life together, but their dream of traveling abroad soon began to crumble. Yemi eagerly prepared the paperwork for their move to the States, hopeful that everything would go smoothly. But things didn't go as planned. Their visa applications kept getting rejected, and with each rejection, their hopes dimmed. The weeks turned into months, and they watched their savings slowly drain away, each passing day bringing more stress and frustration. Yemi lost his job and couldn't pass the visa applications. He began to feel frustrated. As financial pressures mounted, Mimi found herself struggling not only with the disappointment of their failed plans, but also with an eerie series of nightmares that haunted her every night. In her nightmares, Mimi found herself lost in a dense, shadowed forest that seemed to swallow every glimmer of light. The trees twisted upwards like gnarled fingers, their dark branches stretching into the sky and blotting out the moon. A thick, unnatural fog clung to the ground, swirling around her ankles and creeping up her legs like ghostly tendrils. Every sound was muted, save for the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet and an unsettling rustling just beyond her sight. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, taunting her with fleeting glimpses of figures cloaked in darkness. Somewhere deep within the mist echoed a haunting laughter, low and chilling, fading in and out as if carried by an invisible wind. She would call out, desperate, but her voice was swallowed by the void. She would call out, who is there? But the laughter only grew louder, filling the dark void around her. The voices felt like taunts, mocking her in a language she couldn't understand. The laughter grew louder, mocking her until she felt it in her bones. Just as the shadows began to close in, suffocating her, she would wake in terror, drenched in a cold sweat. The nightmares left her drained and restless, making it nearly impossible for her to sleep. The stress of their thwarted plans and financial strain began to erode her peace of mind. Soon, the weight of all this tension started to take a toll on their relationship. Small frustrations grew into arguments, and before long, Mimi and Yemi found themselves fighting almost daily. Their once joyous marriage quickly turned bitter as they struggled to navigate the hardships together. You've brought me nothing but bad luck, Yemi would yell in frustration. Since I married you, my life has been falling apart. Mimi, equally angry, fired back. Oh, so it's my fault now. Before I married you, I was radiant. But look at me now. I'm aging from all this stress. Their arguments became constant, with each blaming the other for their misfortunes. Every little thing became an excuse for a fight. The love and the joy they once shared now buried under resentment. Mimi felt trapped in a nightmare that extended beyond her dreams, as if the darkness of the forest she dreamed about was creeping into her real life, swallowing all that she once held dear. The tension between Mimi and Yemi continued to grow until one day it erupted in a terrible fight. In a moment of uncontrollable anger, Mimi grabbed a turning stick from the kitchen and struck Yemi on the head. Impact was severe, sending him to the hospital and leading to her arrest. When her parents received the distressing call, they rushed to the police station to bail her out. Back at home, shaken and humiliated, Mimi sat with her parents, trying to explain what had been happening since the wedding. She described the eerie nightmares of the dark forest, the mysterious laughter that haunted her, and the overwhelming rage that seemed to consume both her and Yemi. Mama, she said, voice trembling, it's like every day. I forget everyone else exists. All I feel is anger and frustration. I don't remember to talk to anyone. I am lost. Her mother listened with growing concern, her face pale with worry. These are not normal happenings, Mimi. These nightmares, the fights, and the strange urges, they are not ordinary. Her voice quivered with fear. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I don't know, Mama, Mimi whispered, feeling the weight of her mistakes. It's like I'm in a fog. I can barely think straight. Seeing the desperation in her daughter's eyes, Mimi's mother decided to seek help from a pastor, a man respected for his spirituality and deep faith. She hoped he could provide clarity and guidance. When they arrived at the church, the pastor listened intently as Mimi recounted her experiences. He nodded solemnly, his gaze piercing as he considered her words. Finally, he looked at Mimi and her mother with deep concern. Your daughter is under a curse, he said gravely. She has wronged someone deeply, someone who has not forgiven her. This anger and unrest in her spirit will not leave her until she seeks forgiveness from this person. If she does not, this is only the beginning of her suffering. Mimi's heart sank, and she exchanged a frightened glance with her mother. They both knew Mimi had offended many with her sharp tongue and prideful ways. Her mother sighed, sorrow and frustration mingling in her expression. You see, Mimi, you finally brought us to this. I kept telling you to change, but you didn't listen. Now, how will you even know who to apologize to? Mimi's shoulders slumped, realizing the gravity of her actions and the long list of people she had hurt over the years. She felt overwhelmed, as if a dark cloud had settled permanently over her life. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Pastor, is there no other way? The pastor's face softened as he looked at her with compassion. There is a way. You must begin by seeking forgiveness. starting with those closest to you. Pray sincerely, humble yourself before God, and let Him guide you. With faith, I believe God will deliver you from this curse. Mimi and her mother left the church with heavy hearts, each step weighted by the painful journey ahead. For the first time, Mimi understood that her words and actions carried consequences. She knew she would have to find every person she had wronged and ask for their forgiveness one by one. It would be a long road, but she hoped that with humility and faith, she could find redemption and peace. Shame weighed heavily on Mimi's shoulders as she made her way to the hospital. She hoped to reconcile with Yemi, her husband. But as she entered the room, she was met with an icy glare from his mother, standing protectively by his bedside. What are you doing here? Yemi's mother snapped, her voice laced with anger. Your plan to kill my son did not work, did it? Are you here to finish what you have started? Mimi's heart sank. She tried to approach with an apology. Mama, please, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. Don't call me Mama. Yemi's mother interrupted harshly. I am not your mother. My son was doing just fine until he married you. What kind of wife raises her hand against her husband? You looked so perfect the first day I met you, but I see it was all a lie. We are done with you. Mimi, his lawyers will be in touch. The word struck Mimi like a blow, leaving her stunned. She looked to Yemi, hoping for a sign of forgiveness, but his face held nothing but resentment. Mama, she whispered, trembling. Please. Yemi's voice cut through her plea. It's over, Mimi. I'm done with this. Our marriage isn't even up to a year old, but I've had enough. I don't think this will work. Mimi's heart broke as she tried to approach him, pleading, but his mother quickly blocked her, forcing her out of the room. Overwhelmed and unable to stand, Mimi pulled out her phone and called Tony, asking her to come and pick her up. When Mimi returned home, she broke down in front of her parents and Tony, recounting the humiliating encounter at the hospital. Her mother, with a deep sadness, tried to console her daughter and promised to speak to Yemi's mother, hoping to salvage the marriage. The next day, Mimi's mother went to visit Yemi's mother, hoping to appeal to her compassion. But Yemi's mother was unyielding. Haven't you done enough? She spat. We want nothing more to do with your daughter. This marriage is over. Leave us alone. Heartbroken, Mimi's mother returned home, knowing there was no saving her daughter's marriage. She held Mimi's hand tightly and said, You see, my daughter, the consequences of harsh words and actions. I want you to be careful, but it's not the end of the world. You can start over. News of Mimi's failed marriage spread quickly, igniting gossip around town. People who had once admired her beauty now whispered scornfully, sharing half truths and embellishments. Some said her sharp tongue had ruined her marriage. Others claimed that her husband cannot maintain her standards. As Mimi's once perfect life unraveled, she sat alone in a dimly lit room, head bowed, as silent tears streamed down her face. Everything she had, her marriage, her reputation, the life she had crafted so meticulously was gone, crumbling like ashes in her hands. She wondered bitterly where she could possibly begin again, how someone as proud as her could end up here, fallen and alone. And now, as if losing everything wasn't punishment enough, they wanted her to beg. But who? Who could I even beg when I don't know the person in the shadows, she said to herself as she claimed her bed. The shame and uncertainty gnawed at her, a dark weight pressing into her chest as her mind spiraled. Before long, sleep claimed her, pulling her back into the familiar nightmare. She found herself once more in that twisted forest, the trees looming like dark, skeletal hands against the night sky. Shadows stretched around her, dense and heavy, swallowing her in silence. Her breath was shallow as she called out, almost pleading, "Who is there? Why are you doing this to me?" A low mocking laugh echoed from the darkness. "You did this to yourself, Miss Perfect. Have you forgotten me already?" Her blood ran cold. That voice, it was familiar, painful so. But before she could place it, it continued, colder now, yet laced with a terrifying hint of glee. "Stop crying, my dear. I'm just getting started." The voice sent a chill through her bones. There was something unsettlingly familiar about it, a hint of recognition that gnawed at her as she strained to put a face to it. Was it Sissy, Tony, or someone else entirely? Someone she had long forgotten. Jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the voice lingered in her mind, twisting into every face she could remember, but none of them fit. Who was it? Who among the people she had hurt would hold a grudge so powerful as to haunt her life? In her heart, she began to realize the impact her pride and hurtful words had left on others, but it was too late. She had lost her marriage, her reputation, and the life she had once dreamed of. Mimi comes to realize that words are like eggs. Once spoken, they cannot be taken back. We might forget the hurtful things we say to others, but the person wounded by those words may carry that pain long after we are forgotten. Sometimes that pain returns to us in ways we least expect. Let us learn to watch what we say to people, choosing kindness and compassion over harshness. For our word have the power to either uplift or destroy.
The end. Thank you for watching. Let us know where you're watching from in the comment section below. Till next time.